All right, this is the translation of Certamen non mortale, or non-mortal competition. The way I go through the translation, I think, is I'm trying to model the way that you should go through it. You should recognize endings of words in order to construct them in English. Remember, in English, you have to have your subject, which is the nominative, first, your verb second. Normally in a Latin sentence, like with provenient here, it's coming as the last element in a clause. We need that up front. So bear with me. I cover the endings. I try to arrange it in an English word order. I repeat so you can hit phrases. If it does seem confusing, maybe slow down, work with it another time. I've gotten mixed feedback. More people are saying these are helpful than not. So if you're having a hard time following me through them, please come talk to me. I think we can get it to where it will make sense, because I'm trying to approach it logically through the grammar. So doom is an important word here. Doom down here, it tells us it's an adverb, meaning it's going to tell you something about when the verb or how the verb happens. It's a time adverb. So especially if I've got doom, these two tend to come together in pairs in Latin. Doom means more like while, and then is how we're going to do tum down here. While the hostes, that's a nominative plural ending, especially if I've got an NT back here. The enemies were arriving. I use the were arriving, especially with doom, because that imperfect gives you a background action, and that BA is your clear imperfect indicator. Tense indicator, right? We talked about the VA, or the V being AV being a tense indicator for the perfect. Your BA is a super clear tense indicator for the imperfect. So the enemies were arriving in the Roman field. So while the enemies were arriving in the Roman field, meanwhile, the consuls, were preparing. Notice how I go from my noun to the end to pick up that verb. So the consuls were preparing. Pugnare, that's an infinitive. That RE there, active infinitive. I want to translate it here as to fight. It's the direct object of, or it's in the auxiliary verb of to prepare. They were preparing to fight. So meanwhile, the consuls were preparing to fight the army. And you could also probably do that. Meanwhile, the consuls were preparing the army to fight. I guess that might be the way, because exercitum could either be the enemy's army or it could be their own army. So let's do it. If it's their own army, we would say, meanwhile, the consuls were preparing the army to fight. If we're imagining exercitum to be the enemy's army, then we would translate it as, meanwhile, the consuls were preparing to fight the army. All right, Valerius duxit pedetes. Okay, this es now is the accusative. It can't be nominative because I don't have a plural ending on my verb. So I do have a singular nominative ending with Valerius. So he's doing this verb, and I assume that he's doing the verb to the pedetes, because that's an accusative ending. So Valerius led the foot soldiers. Brutus, and I said led because that X right there to me is a, right, duco, dugere, duxi. That's my perfect stem. So Valerius led the foot soldiers. Brutus, anacessit, I recognize that SS is a perfect stem too. So Brutus went ahead, or proceeded ahead, with, here cum means with the cavalry, with the knights. This is an ablative of accompaniment. You have cum here, and they're kind of proceeding with these guys. That's ablative of accompaniment. So Brutus went ahead with his horsemen, with his cavalries. Okay, ostium, I recognize that. That's got to be a genitive plural of hostes. So that's not a word I need right now. I'm finding that could be a nominative plural or accusative plural. I look at my verb. I have to assume this is accusative because my verb is singular. NS is a nominative ending we'll see more and more of. This US is certainly nominative. So I'm saying that Aruns Tarquinius led the cavalries of the enemies. So that's that first part. Oh, but we're learning more about Tarquinius. He's the filius of the regis. All right, so I'm going to go back and modify that. Aruns Tarquinius, the son of the king, led the cavalries of the enemy. Okay, post eos, behind them, right? That's a prepositional phrase, so I can translate that on its own. It works well by itself. Behind them, the king, and he's going to be the subject of this verb, but I see a relative clause set off by this kui, for whom, right? Behind them, the king, for whom the name erat Tarquinius Superbus, for whom the name was Tarquinius Superbus. Or we can do this in a more smooth fashion for English, whose name was Tarquinius Superbus. But that kui is dative, it's a dative of possession. We can do it as for whom the name was or whose name was. All right, now I can pick up the main clause again with he himself came with the legions. And again, another ablative of accompaniment with cum there. So from the top, behind them, the king, whose name was Tarquinius Superbus, he himself came or arrived with the legions. Tum. Then, Aruns, there's my perfect tense indicator with that AV. Then Aruns approached to the battle line, agmen means battle line, of the Romans. That's a genitive plural. Right. Then Aruns approached to the battle line of the Romans. Inter milites, okay, there's a prepositional phrase. Let's just go ahead and get rid of that. Between the soldiers, cognovit Brutum, he recognized Brutus. Brutus is the direct object with that accusative ending. Ubi can mean when or where. Here I think it means where, because I've got this adverb that kind of is this preposition that's kind of a spatial preposition. So then Aruns approached to the battle line of the Romans. Between the soldiers, I guess, where between the soldiers he recognized Brutus. Ille est vir. That is a man, or that is the man, he said. Inquit means he said. That is the man, qui, who wants expellere, who wants to expel me and my father ex patria, from the fatherland. That's going to be an ablative of separation, or ablative probably of place from which, because patria is a kind of a geographical space. So that is the man, he said, qui, who wants to kick me and my father from the fatherland. And ruit ad consulum, and he rushed. I don't have any other accusative there, so I'm going to use the pronoun he because of the T there, and he rushed toward the consul. Brutus, he's doing my verb, and he's actually not doing it because of the non, right? So Brutus expectavit, there's a perfect tense indicator. Brutus expected the attack, not. All right, so let's rework that. Brutus did not expect the attack. Illi viri, those men, right? Ille means that. In the plural, in front of a noun, it's going to mean those. Those men, that NT is telling me what they're doing. Those men rush into battle. A multis militibus. Oh, I've got a passive here. So that a is by, because if I have a passive verb here and I've got an ablative, more than likely it's an ablative of agent, right? It's telling me who's doing that passive verb. a multis multibus, by many soldiers, viri opognabantur. This nominative is the subject of this passive verb. It's actually receiving the action. Men were being attacked. That BA is my tense indicator, imperfect. Men were being attacked by many soldiers, right? Let's polish that up a little bit. The men were being attacked, ablative of agent, a multis multibus, by many soldiers, all right? AE, they, right? These guys, haberunt, had, right? That's the perfect form of habeo, habere, habui. So these guys had hastas in the thoraxes, right? They had spears in their throat. They fell, kakederunt, that erunt is perfect, right? They fell down from the horses, or from the horses. Probably ablative of place from which, or ablative of separation. Hard to tell on that. They fell off the horses, that's for sure. So these men had spears in their throat, or thoraxes. They fall from their horses, from the horses, and they died. Again, we're in the perfect tense with that erunt. Soon the Romans wincet, winco, wincere. That E right there is a future tense indicator. So soon the Romans will win the battle. The kings, because this is a prepositional phrase, probably ablative of place from which, ex Roma, from Rome, the kings, expello, expellere, that E is also future tense. The kings will be expelled, or will be kicked out from Rome. So soon the Romans will win the battle. From Rome, the kings will be expelled. Or in non-Yoda speak, the kings will be expelled from Rome. All right, so you want to make sure you have a correct translation of that in your notebook, and be ready on any given day to have a Blackboard quiz on this text. Good luck.